Demonstration. Giving the people that we're teaching a clear demonstration is of the utmost value. Now, you can do this silently first, and then you can do it with an explanation later, and that's a common method of doing it. But there are a few things that we need to consider when we're doing a demonstration to make sure that the learner is going to pick this up the best way. And you'll see there's a lot of parallels between this and between fault spotting when we come to the fault spotting part later, which is observation. So this is going to have a lot of parallels between the two. So let's cover first distance. Now, distance of the demonstration from the person that you're going to be demonstrating to, it depends on what you're trying to convey to the person. Let me give you that example again that I gave before. If I'm trying to explain to you that your thumb should be outside of your hand when you make a fist, it works better if I'm slightly closer to you. However, if I was trying to demonstrate, for example, the rhythm of a run as someone is running over, say, 30 meters or something like that, it would be inappropriate to be too close because you wouldn't see it, so you'd need to move back. So what I would say about the distance is you need to experiment, and it needs to be appropriate. Next thing we turn to are angles, and when I'm facing towards the camera like this, you can see I'm at an angle towards you. Now I'm facing straight on. That's another angle. That is, to me, I would call that 0. I'm there. Whereas if I turn this way to you, this is going to be at 90 degrees to you. The best way that I can explain this, and the coaching literature does disagree on this slightly. Whatever the coaching literature does say, I have a method which is going to help you no matter what you're doing. But let's say, for example, we use this as our back line of the room or the area in which we're teaching. Here is our center line, and I referred to this as 0 degrees there. And this, of course, here would be 90 degrees, represented by the little square there, the rectangle. That represents that is 90 degrees. By the way, I don't mean this to be a mathematics lesson. This is simply this is the simplest way that I can explain these different angles. Okay, so from here, if I have an angle, let me take this out. If I have an angle here of about 90 degrees there, this is kind of just, it's me drawing and it's a bit of a guess. So we've got 90 degrees across here, which means that these are each 45 degrees there, like that. Now, much of the coaching literature is going to suggest to you that that is your optimum coaching angle. Now, what do I mean by the optimum coaching angle? That means that if someone is in this angle here, they're going to see a demonstration that their brain is going to be able to translate into something meaningful. Let me say, for example, if I'm doing a punch towards you and I want you to see it towards you like this, and I do a punch like that, you can see that straight on. Now, if, however, you were stood at this angle here, like that, you wouldn't see it straight on, you'd see it at about 45 degrees, and you would punch like this. Now, how does that translate? Okay, really straightforward. That sometimes translates that if someone is not in the best place to observe, that what they will do quite often is, because instead of seeing this, they saw this. They may well indeed punch across like this, because this is what their visual perception due to their position is. Now, I know that a lot of the coaching literature does suggest an observation angle, of 45 degrees. But from experience, I've found that 60 degrees seems to be the better angle. So I'm going to redraw this now. One thing it's not going to take the geniuses amongst you to figure out is that I am not very artistic. I'm not particularly good at drawing things. I'm very much a scientific person, very much a science brain. And this genuinely is as good as I can actually draw. I'll make no apologies for this because you're not here for a drawing masterclass. This is just a representation, so you understand. But the principles are the same. Now, these people outside of here would not be seeing a great demonstration. These people in here are going to see a good demonstration. Now, sometimes people think, well, okay, that's great, but what about all of these other people here, like this? Let's say if you were teaching a group of students, what would you do? This is relatively straightforward. You have two things that you can do. Number one is you go back like this. And then, as you go back, this line will increase to have more people inside of it, like this. Okay? So if you go backwards to demonstrate, more people can see you within that angle because you've gone back. There's a better way of doing it altogether though, and I call this a 3-point method of teaching. So what we've got is we've got the people here covered, we also need to have the people here covered, and we also need to have the people here covered, like this. Now, if you have a wall like this, or a track, or anything like this, this is a flat wall here. It is 180 degrees around. These angles here are 60 degrees. So we're divided by 60 degrees. That equals 3. So we've got 3. So as long as we've got 1, 2, 3 points from where we teach, we will cover a big group. Now, that is by far preferable to doing what many people will do, which is to demonstrate in a semicircle. Now, a lot of people will say, come round, gather round me in a semicircle. Fine, okay, I do not like that, and I'll explain why with another terrible diagram. Okay, here's my semicircle. You can see I've drawn participants around here. This is me demonstrating from the central position there. If I'm facing forward, I have an optimum angle here of that 60 degrees. These people outside of here may be seeing something from as far away as 90 degrees. So they could be really, really way off. Again, there's another way of doing this. You could turn and rotate your position so that you incorporate them here and incorporate them here, and that is always preferable. But both of these methods, if you do this, and I don't like this, I prefer this, because it reminds you to do it. This can encourage a bit of laziness. If you're going to do this, this, in my opinion, is always preferable. This is generally easier, and a lot of people use this method. But so long as you remember that you go 1, 2, 3 points, in this case, 1, 2, 3 points. As long as you change your demonstrating angle, the people are going to be able to see what you want to do. So my suggestion for angles is 60 degrees times 3 points. Points of demonstration, that's what I mean by that. So 60 degrees times 3 points. In the worked examples section, which you'll find below this, you'll see examples of me teaching to a group, and what you'll see is both the perspective of me teaching and the perspective of the participants, so that you can see what they would see if they were doing that. And again, I will use the example of teaching a punch because it's a very, very straightforward example for me to be able to do that from. But it applies to a football kick or to anything else that you're going to be teaching. Let's turn our attention to speed. Now, we'll come to this in more detail later on, but the speed, if you're going to be giving someone enough time for them to process the information that you do, your speed needs to be appropriate. Let me give you an example of an appropriate speed for you to be able to copy a punch. Let me give you an example of an inappropriate speed for you to be able to copy a punch. It happens too quickly for the brain to be able to process it. And what happens is essentially that you've got an input from your eyes. This then goes to the brain and it goes through an M3 motor pathway. Not M3 as in the motorway, but it's a motor pathway. And that has a latency period of 0.6 of a second. Now, what's that mean? That's how long it takes you to think about it. That's what it means. If my demo is quicker than 0.6 of a second, you have virtually no chance of copying it. If, however, my demonstration takes longer than 0.6 of a second, you have every chance of copying it. Now, I've got nothing wrong with people saying, watch this firstly at normal speed. Now, here's how we do it slowly. And doing it much more slowly. That, I think, is much more preferable. Once we've done that, and once we've done the silent demo and then the talking demonstration, so that we've got two forms of feedback in that, then we can actually start to consider a couple of more things. Okay, so when we are doing our demos, it's a good idea firstly to do a silent demo and then do a talking demo afterwards. Now, one of the things that I should point out is that when you do a demonstration to somebody, quite often visual feedback is going to supersede all other forms of feedback because it's a demonstration. Let me give you an example of this. So do be careful of doing this. I tell someone, I want you to throw a jab, and I want you to make sure that your palm faces down when the contact lands, like this. This is how a jab should land. But then what I do is I say, make sure that your palm faces down. And I do this, and my palm is clearly facing sideways. Now, what's far more likely to happen in this scenario is that you will do what I do, not what I say. So it's really important to make sure that if you are doing a demonstration, that you can do it perfectly. Now, this can be really, really difficult. Let's say, for example, one of the sports I coach is pole vault. It's very, very difficult to do a perfect demonstration of pole vault. It's just very, very difficult to do. Certainly when I was younger, I could do it. Nowadays, I must admit, I find it much harder, but I can still do a demonstration that's good enough. But there's a way around it. What I have is an iPad, and I take it along and I'll say, okay, can you see the takeoff here? Can you see the position of the takeoff there? Have a look on this iPad. Here's the position. Then I can freeze frame it. I can play it at full speed, and I can show them that on an iPad or a laptop or, well, even a phone. A phone's not ideal, but I can even show them it on a phone as well. And I can let them see an example of what the thing should look like. It's very important that a perfect visual demonstration is given. So let's go through that. Coming back to our board, these notes are in the notes section below, so don't worry about remembering them. You can print these things off. So firstly, we need to be able to do a perfect visual demonstration. Now, if you can't do that, have an example of one near to you. We would do this normally at normal speed and then at slow speed, slower than 0.6 of a second. We would obviously be doing it at an appropriate distance and at the correct demonstrating angle. We'll come back to that in 1 second. And then we do what is called a talking or explaining demonstration. Now, let me demonstrate that to you. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to throw the jab again, and I'm going to talk along this as I do this. But I'm going to give you a method for this, and it's really, really straightforward, very, very effective. Firstly, what I do is I do it. Then I talk about it. It's virtually impossible to say what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw my jab, I'm going to keep my thumb outside of my hand, my wrist flat, 95% of reach at the elbow, the shoulder's going to turn forward and the palm is going to turn to face the floor. That's really, really hard to do. So what you do is you do this, and some people won't relate to it. So you do this. I'll turn sideways for an angle so that you can see the joints. And then what I do is with my free hand, I point at the joints to which I'm referring. And then this highlights it to someone who may not be particularly good at listening. They may be on the autism spectrum. They may have a hearing impairment, and they may not speak your language. And sometimes they're just not listening, or they're too far back and they can't hear. So, like this, I point and I say, thumb outside of the hand, punch with all 4 knuckles. Wrist is flat, and I turn sideways to demonstrate that, because this is an appropriate angle to do that. 95% of reach at the elbow and the shoulder is forward like this. And then what I'll do is I'll then repeat it slowly so people can copy it. But I have explained it. Then I keep demonstrating it like this so people can copy it, and then I will offer feedback if someone is making a mistake. Now, you'll notice I've written down here open side as well. What does that mean? Okay, so this is a particular method of demonstrating that makes a lot of sense. Now, let me demonstrate the jab and the cross, two most fundamental boxing punches. I'll demonstrate it towards the camera, but then I'm going to turn sideways so that you can see it, because you'll see a different perspective. There's a good reason for this. Now, so I've got my jab, goes to there, my cross goes to there, and then I retract, reset back to my start position. It's very important, and I'll mention this later on in the course, no doubt. If you have a good start position, you have a very good chance of getting to a good finish position. If you have a poor start position, you have virtually no chance of getting to a good finish position. So take the time to set up right. Don't rush it. If I'm getting ready and I'm too rushing it, no, the first time I learn it, take your time. Get a good stance. Get in the right position. 1, 2, reset. If I was swinging a baseball, the baseball bat, the last thing I'd want to do is to get there and be rushed and doing this. I would get into position, I would take my time, I would get my grip, and I wouldn't even look up until I was ready. Make them wait. Make them wait. You are the one that can take the time. So take that time. So the open side, okay? Very straightforward to explain this. Open side. Closed side. I'm demonstrating a punch like this, and I want to demonstrate the rotation of the punch, and I do this. 1, 2, reset. You can see more of the demonstration from the open side than if I do it like this. 1, 2, reset. So there's a difference. So it's worth remembering that you do your demonstration from the open side towards the people that you're teaching. Now, there is a time, and I'm going to explain this later, where we have to break this rule, and there's a very good reason. I'll explain it in detail when we get there, but sometimes rules have to be bent. But these are your things that you need to really consider when you're thinking about demonstrating perfectly. The distance, the angles, using 3 points if necessary, the speed of your demonstration, that the demonstration needs to be perfect, that you do it firstly normal speed and slow speed, then you do it with talking and explaining, and the demonstration should be from the open side of the body. They are the most important key points. Let's have a look at that in the module below of me doing this, and you'll be able to see it from the participant's perspective and my perspective, and then you'll be able to see how this works for both people.